word shogun is an office held by a high-ranking samurai. It's an abbreviation for Sei-Tai Shogun, which means something like barbarian subduing generalissimo. And it's a term that goes back to the early 9th century. And in the medieval period, beginning in the late 12th century, it increasingly came to be used as the title of the ranking military chieftain, actually the effective ruler of the country. And in 1600, the Tokugawa established what turned out to be the third and last shogunate, or government of shogun.
Shogun is a military ruler of the whole country.
Now, Japan, of course, had always had an emperor, and theoretically, the emperor reigned over everything, and all authority was vested in him. And in fact, the title of shogun was bestowed by the emperor. But the emperor had no power whatsoever. Not only that, the emperors were virtually prisoners in their palace in Kyoto during the Tokugawa period. During the 17th century, not a single emperor was allowed to leave the palace grounds. The Tokugawa shoguns just kept them as virtual prisoners. So the shogun was the ruler of the country, and he was like a feudal king.
To be a samurai is the highest honor which a man can hope to attain. The obedience of a samurai is without question.
Now, samurai is one of several terms that has been used for the warriors of ancient Japan, and it's a status. In other words, someone belonging to the samurai class has an elite status. The samurai class arose during the medieval period of Japanese history, and those who came to hold the status of samurai were from families that could trace their ancestry back many generations, if not centuries, locally powerful family.
My master wishes you to write down everything about your family. A samurai has to have his birth and death recorded, Anjin-San.
Now, in later centuries, such as the 16th century, people became samurai because of the great increase in fighting. But essentially, the samurai were members of an elite. During the 16th century, there probably was more warfare and bloodshed in Japan than any place else in the world, and the 16th century wasn't too peaceful in Europe. One of the most brutal practices, if you can put it that way, was the practice of taking heads after battles. It's said that after one battle in 1600s, the Battle of Sekigahara, by means of which the Tokugawa established themselves as the ruler of the country, and it's said that they collected 35,000 heads as a result of that battle. Rewards were given on the basis of the number of heads that you collected. Now, the Tokugawa period was a time of great flourishing in the townsman class, the merchant class. And one of the manifestations of that was the establishment of pleasure quarters, particularly in the great cities of Edo, Osaka, Kyoto. And they were actually walled enclaves, and people had to leave their status behind when they went into these pleasure quarters. And they had baths and sumo wrestling and places of assignation and restaurants and so forth. And many samurai were at a disadvantage. Not only did they have to leave their great symbols of status, the swords, behind, but the samurai were on fixed stipends. It was the merchants, the upper-class merchants, who had all the money.
The sword is the soul of a samurai. If he forgets it or loses it, he will never be excused.
A major step in the development of the samurai class was taken by the warlord Hideyoshi at the end of the 16th century. He moved all of those samurai who had not already moved into the castle towns and cities. He obliged them to move in there. So he uprooted them and moved them into these urban centers, and they became an urban ruling class, whereas previously they had been a provincial military class. So that in itself was an extraordinary development. I don't think you can find anything comparable to that in any history outside of Japan, in which so large a class was completely uprooted from the countryside and moved into the cities.